Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. We are continuing the theme, Processing Our Pain, tribute to PTSD Awareness Month. I always begin with a little snippets of what this month is all about, but a lot of times people say it much better than I do. Eric Gershon says it this way: no one escapes pain, fear, and suffering, yet from pain can come wisdom, from fear can come courage, from suffering can come strength, if we have the virtue of resilience. Resilience is a word that we heard a lot of times before, but I still feel it has value in this topic. Today we have a new guest. His name is Michael Thornhill, I believe is how you say it. Thank you, Michael, for joining us and just sharing your insight on this topic with us today.
Thanks, Robert. Pleasure to be here. And yes, you pronounce my name perfectly. Thank you very much for having me.
No problem. I always tell in the beginning a disclaimer for those, obviously I'm in the States, but wherever you are around the world, I do encourage you to find what resources are helpful. Recovery, healing is different for everyone. It's unique and to the individual itself. So when you are in crisis, I do encourage, if you're in the United States, to call 1-800-273-8255. Don't wait to the last minute. If you are in need, get help today. I start off with another quote because it sounds like I have no original words for myself, but it's from Adam. It's from Adam Braun, and I'm just going to start a conversation this way, Michael. It says, "True self-discovery begins where your comfort zone ends." What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
I mean, I think that means coming to Earth, doesn't it?
Yes.
And the comfort zone ended.
Yes.
But no, I think it's a beautiful quote, and I just want to reiterate. I think it's beautiful having that hotline available. It's so difficult for us to ask for help, and sometimes we think we deserve it, and then we wait until we needed help like 10 months before. There's plenty of help out there, everyone. So just encourage you to reach out to that line, a friend or family or someone else that you feel like is going to be able to just listen. And don't have to be so far out of your comfort zone before you ask help. But
and when I think about this quote, just a lot of times, unfortunately, recovery, it can be a little bit, I would say uncomfortable. A lot of times in healing, there is discomfort, and sometimes when we kind of get set in our minds that I'm not going to go out there, and this is what we're talking about when it comes to resources and actually thinking of ourselves and our self-care and going there, because a lot of times I always appreciate having new guests, but those listening or watching are like, well, who is Michael? So here we go, Michael. I would like you, if you mind, sharing a little bit about what you do and what drives you to continue doing what you do. Obviously, the first. So
for sure. Well, my name is Michael Thornhill. I'm from Wales originally, in the UK. I now live in Peru with my wife, Amy. And we're co-founders of Casa Galactica in Peru, a multidimensional center for healing and evolution. We really dedicate our lives to helping people empower their healing, activate their intuition, and embody their truth. We work with many different alternative healing modalities, including plant medicines, non-psychoactive plant medicines, and also ayahuasca, after studying and training down here in the indigenous traditions to be able to help people heal from trauma, to really find hope, joy, and freedom again. My path brought me here because I was heavily addicted to many substances and many different things, and I was living a life filled with suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, undiagnosed PTSD. And after beginning my healing journey, it was heavily catalyzed by plant medicines. After working with plant medicines, I was able to heal many, many deep levels and layers of trauma, which then put me onto a path of being into service to other people. And of course, the road's not always been smooth. It's not just a magic bullet. And there's been a lot of integration, a lot of really deep healing work, a lot of going into the depths of that darkness. But everything that we've been learning on the way on our path, everything that we've been blessed to have help heal ourselves, we've dedicated our lives to studying and teaching and sharing others, so that others may find that light that's within, that's available to each and every one of us. And as you were saying before, Robert, there's many different paths to healing, and we just like to share what has been useful for us, what we think is some of the most efficient and effective ways to help people find that peace, happiness, love, joy, and truth again.
I just, listening to just you say, you started, you taking care, you got your help, you started doing the plant for your own self. And then the funny thing, I'm losing my words because it's very similar to me in the sense that when you go through something that's tragic or traumatic and you had to make a big change in your life, you had to shift your life dramatically. This month is tribute to PTSD Awareness Month, and to shed light on remembering, we have our calendar and our schedule just set, but a lot of times it's filled up because we don't remember things very well. And I think a lot of times we tend to remember things is by serving each other. We try to find what worked for us and do it in service. And I remember telling people, like, why do you do this? You're in the midst of a lot of things. Why do you do it? I do it because it helping people became my healing. Serving people became my recovery. And like, obviously everything I do right now, whether it's the podcast or my work in the mental health field, is to serve others. So I do appreciate and commend you for doing that. A lot of times it's very easy for us to forget what did help. And I do encourage the holistic approach when it comes to recovery. I ask clients sometimes, what do you like to do before? It's kind of funny. They like hobbies. Like, I'm allowed to have hobbies. I'm like, yes, you are. And that's kind of funny because a lot of times they're like, no, I'm not allowed because I didn't do X, Y, Z. I'm like, no, I think you should get back into some of those things because those things, the dusty guitar, whatever you used to, or creative modalities can be very helpful. Not everything, but helpful. We start putting value is a lot of times not valued. So I found that kind of puzzling, not puzzling, but very human. You say, when it comes about talking about this kind of subject, it is, comfort zone is actually putting your foot on the ground. You're not just kind of floating around. So I want to ask you a question, turning it back to you. How have you worked with processing? And, you mentioned in general, processing your pain, you mentioned PTSD, and what has worked and what has not worked. And I like this moment because it as we preface, it's not exactly the same for everyone, but I think it can be encouraging as we continue this dialogue. So go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, everyone has their own path, and this is what's worked for me. Working with trauma healing modalities which focus in healing trauma, pain, suffering at the root cause. So that's kind of how I would kind of like the wide catchment of that healing trauma at the root cause, rather than just looking at the symptoms or putting a band-aid on it. And again, putting a band-aid on it can be really, really beneficial because that might be the first step in that process, but eventually you need to heal the wound underneath. So whatever that may be, and that for me has been body-centered trauma healing work, which is stuff that I offer, but I was very, very heavily working with a trauma therapist who was in somatic experiencing. For me, that transformed my experience much more than some of the other therapies. My personal experience, that was just in terms of therapy, working with the body. And then, of course, the plant medicines that we work with here, ayahuasca, being something that, in my experience, in our experience here, can catalyze trauma healing processes by 5, 10, 15, 20 years. When I first drank ayahuasca, in the first weekend ceremony, I was able to let go of cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, just immediately. And it didn't mean that there wasn't deeper layers to go, but there was a distance, there was a freedom from that, and there was an understanding of the trauma underneath it, the lack of unconditional love, the living out of alignment that I was not aware of, that I'd been to therapy for many, many years before, but it wasn't just as crystalline, as crystal clear a recognition, my own realization, this is why I've been living this. And I think that radical shift to self-compassion, rather than feeling like I was a drug addict, to actually see, okay, I've experienced these tough things, and this is what I've done to self-soothe. And then recognizing that, bringing that awareness there to be able to transform that. then I'd also say that then there's many different plant medicines that, even if you're not like, oh, I don't want to go to Peru or ayahuasca, there's just many different other plant medicines that can help with the nervous system, many different adaptogenic plant medicines that can help with trauma, that can help to repair the effects of trauma on the nervous system. And we work with a plethora of different plants here that are from the Amazon rainforest, but you'll also find that I'm always interested. Anytime someone's coming from the States to the Peru, I'm like, can you bring me some of these plants from the States? So I'm always like on mountain rose herbs, looking at all the different plants, adaptogens for different, helping the brain repair, because the effects of trauma in the brain or in the body. So working with plant medicines, and then the other side of things is then healing of the body as well, like yoga and qigong, getting the energy moving through the body. And then absolutely at the core of all this is a deep faith in something higher than ourselves. And in the way that we work with different channeling different energies. I studied Reiki, and now that's developed into other healing transmissions. But to underline it all, it doesn't matter what face of God that is. It's that faith in a higher power that for us is represented through plants, through other different modalities, and also the direct connection that everyone has here and now. So praying, because when all else fails, just pray for that help. And that combination really is really our life's work in kind of putting those modalities together in a way that's effective, grounded, and practical, and accessible to people.
In the beginning when you're talking, you're sharing that you try to go to the root, and I find that very, I for one, I find that very, very much the way I like to go with things, because it's like I remember reading about epidemic. We just had COVID. There was an epidemic, and in a town, and they did the symptoms. They handled the symptoms, and eventually they realized it was just the handle on the water, the thing that was contaminated, that people used all the time. And I say this not to say, but it is good to dive deeper. For me, when it comes to faith, obviously Revive Ministry, people look at it, they're like, oh, this is faith. This is a truly outreach podcast. It's like, for me, it's about inspiring hope. When I think about faith, because I wasn't always in the faith, I thought about that the world around me, because I'm very practical. I think about it this way: the only thing that really got me really over that edge, because there's a lot of unknowns and uncertainties. They're like, why I need to know this, was basically everything changes around me, but the God, whatever you believe, whatever your faith, the higher power, doesn't change. And for me, that basic concept is very comforting, and can be when you're really struggling with a lot of stuff, because your friends can change, your spouse, everything can drastically change, your relational, your environmental, your financial. But it's nice to have something to center. And I do encourage that idea of inspiring hope. I remember just one little bit I want to share is that Viktor Frankl, he's very inspiring man. I read his book, and one thing he said was, the people who are in the Jewish concentration camps, the people who would see that there was another day ahead, are the ones who were more successful. When you could look and be excited for the next day, it is the road to recovery. I like the idea that you say it's not always good. Sometimes it's up and down, but it's the journey that matters. I feel when we put value back in ourselves, we are truly investing in ourselves. And I feel that takes time, but it takes you going deeper. And I'd really appreciate you sharing that. I'm going to say this. You're from Wales, right? Tell me if this word is said right, because I've been saying it a lot. Harath. Is it Harath? How do you say this?
Harath.
Harath. Oh my goodness, I've been butchering it. But Harath, I love this word. My wife has these untranslatable words. And I found it so odd that Wales, because I used to work a little bit in the summer in the UK, so I was not in Wales actually, but a homesickness of somewhere you cannot return to, nostalgia and grief of the lost places of your past, places that never were. I feel a lot of us kind of feel that way sometimes. Sometimes we're stuck that way. Maybe that's why we want to stay in our comfort zone. We lie to ourselves. We're like, this is as good as it gets. And I feel sometimes those could be the biggest stumbling blocks to moving forward.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you sharing that word. Disclaimer, I didn't know I didn't know what the word meant. You put that description, and I double checked how to say it before I came on because I
Okay.
from Wales
Okay.
and then butchered the word. So I did a little homework just before the show, but absolutely beautiful word. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's something that comes up as well. It's an interesting, I think sometimes how we create this idea of our past or the future of this, something that just is a thought of something that we want to be or where we were, and we try to recreate, or we get sad or depressed because we can't have that. And I think that surrender to that change that you were discussing, that's just that surrender to that higher power, surrender to whatever faith that may be, whether it be in your higher self or God or the universe or creation, whatever you want to call it. Just that surrender to knowing exactly that you're on the right path to where you're going, and you can't be in the wrong place.
I find, when, there's so many things coming out. Eventually, right now we're talking about, this month is about PTSD, and sometimes we're kind of unfair to people who are older than us, who are like, I don't understand this stuff. Well, it makes sense. 1980s were when, at least in the state, DSMV, when we actually put PTSD as actual legitimate disorder, not just human weakness. So you can kind of see that it took till the 1980s to even classify even more, something to address more than just something that we could shame. Cultures, in every culture, there's shame in different ways. You can see it in their telenovelas or whatever. There's something that tells you that you are less because you didn't do this or you didn't achieve that. And I feel that with PTSD, notably, I think that was a big change. It was a lot of veterans coming back from the war. They're not acclimating well. I was in the U.S. Air Force. My brother was Army. I was the only one who was a chair force. But besides that, it is very much not just the military. There's people who experience trauma daily, and trauma is becoming a bigger word and more talked about because, like you said, you had undiagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of times we just think this is normal, them having night terrors, or I'm having these, these suspicions. I'm tense all the time. The stress, the cortisol that you have each day, it affects you. The way you look at life will affect how you treat yourself. And in the beginning, not to go, we like to be heard. We are needed. We're not islands. So, Michael, I want to ask you, segueing back to you, what have been some notable elements that changed the way you looked at pain or your healing or what you've been through and went through and where you are today? What was a transition? I know you mentioned the plants, but what was some notable, I would say, milestones along the way that?
For sure. Thank you. I think the first thing to know is, like, from anyone suffering with PTSD or trauma or stress or anxiety, quite often, like I said, in my experience, is undiagnosed. So it just becomes your base level experience. So this is just like, oh, this is how I interact with the world. Or, okay, I smoke cigarettes and I drink alcohol because this helps me function, or whatever it may be. And then often in society, especially with addiction or whatever it may be that we're using to cope with PTSD, it's often demonized. It's often said, you're a bad person, which plays into the trauma. So I think that one of the biggest shifts of self-compassion is, I think I mentioned this earlier, is just this recognizing, okay, some things have happened that have had an effect. There's been a cause and effect, and this is the effect that's playing out. So I think that shift to change, to recognize, okay, these are some things that have shifted and changed. The second thing is that you don't have to feel or experience life completely free from PTSD and trauma to have a loving, fulfilling, joyful life. I think sometimes you think, okay, when I'm going to be healed, then I'm going to be able to start living my life. And unfortunately, Scott, everyone, it might take a while. So
it may take a while, exactly. And I really appreciate you saying that, because it's unreal. It's pretty unrealistic. We are gonna. It's not just wiping it out. It's about adapting to change. Albert Einstein said, the the notion of someone intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. It's not the idea that change or pain or you're going to have life events. You can't avoid it. You're going to have experiences. You can't avoid it. But what changes is how you view them, how you go about it, how you address them. I do really appreciate you mentioning that when it comes to change, and also when it comes to healing, and when we look at ourselves, and when we're able to be compassionate, not only to other people, also to yourselves, that you are deserving of help, that you can be happy, and it's okay to not be okay. A lot of times we have this destination only if statements. You'll be waiting a long time. You're not defined by I say this, I was trying to get to this. Accountability is not a bad word if it's a safe place. If you're around people that really want you to be well, if you allow yourself boundaries to say, I'm not having a good day, but I'm going to try again tomorrow. If you can do that, I feel it does bode well. I want to ask you, Michael, is there anything you would like to say? We're talking about PTSD, and after this, I want to talk a little bit more about your work in Peru. But if there's anyone listening today struggling right now, and they're just, they feel right now and feel they're struggling to feel any hope, and they want to avoid anything and everything. They're just complacent. They're not like in crisis, but they're just like, this is as good as it gets. What would you say to them? Obviously, this is not. We know that it's different for everyone, but what would you say to them? Because I know for me, I was there, so I just want to hear from you.
I think I would just say I don't think it is. Mm-hmm. I don't think it is as good as it gets. Just entertain the idea that it might not be as good as it gets. You don't even need to fully believe it. Just entertain the fact that I know what it's like to be there and not have a different perspective. If you're in one room and you're looking around and all you can see is the four walls, that's what your experience is like. Mm-hmm. So you might not know where the door is out of that experience yet, but if you start trying to surround yourself with people that can help you turn that light on in the room and help you find a path to another level of experience, then eventually it will come. And I would just say some practical grounded steps to do that is, and I think you mentioned this before, what led towards it is surround yourself with people who love you for who you are. Yeah. Surround yourself with people who want you to get well. Mm-hmm. Surround yourself with people who believe in you, and that's going to rub off on you. And here's a great thing. You don't even need to have a family who do that, because if we're all waiting for families to be able to do that, we might also be waiting a long time. And as some families are great and some family members are and everything like that, but perhaps you're lucky and you find yourself surrounded with that in your family. But there's support groups. There's people going through similar things. There's always going to be someone who's 2 or 3 steps ahead of you on that path and can help you and share those things with you that help them to get out of that place where you find yourself right now. And a lot of this information, a lot of this advice is completely free. You don't even need to spend a penny, And then what I would say then is, if you're really just like destined that you really want to go and you really want to take a transformation, and you have the finances and the resources available, then you can invest in a program like that we offer, or invest in some of the work and a trip where it's a concentrated 10-day experience or however long experience it is, to really help not only transform the energetic, mental, emotional, spiritual shame and guilt, PTSD and trauma that gives you then space to feel that energy. It can give you a catapult forwards that can enable you to then start implementing the tools that you learn and then start building the life that you prefer. Sometimes we can get just stuck in the mud, and sometimes we just have to move. Sometimes we don't even know which way, but just if you can just start putting your hand up, asking for help, and like, okay, put your hand up, putting the intention out, praying out. Okay, a support group comes up, a friendship arises, an opportunity, perhaps a moving of a location arises, perhaps a retreat comes up, whatever it may be. But just start moving towards those things that actually are in alignment with you, that are actually wanting you to move from surviving to thriving. Surrounding yourself with those loving people, and then just take it step by step. know it can be a longer journey, and just be in there for the ride and trust that things can shift and do change. That's the only thing that does change is everything. So
yeah, and one of my mentors, one told me, he said, if you're the smartest person in the room, you gotta get to another room. Basically, when it comes to another thing is Albert Einstein, which I like to coin. He says, people say I'm very smart. It's just that I stay with problems a little longer. That's it. Like a lot of our lives are difficult. If you go to the gym and you exercise, sometimes you got those mornings like, oh, it's gonna hurt. If you kind of think about that, some of these things in life are gonna be painful. Some of these things may be difficult, but the normalization of that and understand, but not all of it is gonna be that way. It feels that every day can't be a crisis situation, but every day can't be absent of change, absent of struggles. I learned little from just being comfortable. I learned little from being around people who think just like me. And when you're able to kind of be sound and understand that accountability is not a bad word. You saying I messed up, it's okay. If the best thing you do is just get up that day and you're like, this day went, you had a Monday on top of a Monday, it was Garfield Monday on top of it, and you say, what, that one didn't go well, but I'm going to try again tomorrow. That is recovery. That is moving forward. The idea is it's not these huge steps you see in movies. Sometimes it's the little steps, just saying, what, like you said, I like what you said. You said, just plant the idea. The person's like, oh, I don't think it's better than this. I think you're wrong. Sometimes you just need to shake, because if they're not tested, they'll say, I just need to be in survival mode. And regards of PTSD, that is a lot of times the case. You're in survival mode. You're kind of reacting to things that are not related. I'm going through trauma therapy myself. And one thing I realize is that everything's connected. Everything is connected. So the reason I'm going through it, people are like, you're doing great. Maybe for you, but for me, if someone passes away, I don't want to experience every single person I lost in my life during that time. So it's kind of addressing them, because I'm investing myself in the future, so I could be better to serve, better to help others, be a better husband. All these kind of things are important to me, and I want to share with those, not minimizing those who are out there maybe just at the first step. If you're in crisis, again, 1-800-273-8255 in the United States, wherever you are around the world, I do encourage you to find what is available. Michael, is there anything else you would like to share? I know you mentioned Peru and all, where everything will be in the notes, but anything you wanted to share before we kind of wrap things up, Michael?
Yeah, for sure. Well, firstly, Robert, thank you for having me on. Thank you for all the work you're doing in your own healing journey. That's inspirational. And thank you to all the listeners for your attention here today. We just want to invite you to visit our website, casagalactica.com. And if you want to subscribe to our mailing list, we have a free trauma healing workshop, a fundamentals of trauma healing workshop that I did, just about 5 hours. And it's just a completely free resource for you. So if you're at the beginning stages, or even if you're a bit more advanced, there's a lot of really good teaching in there that will help create a framework for you to begin to heal trauma and find support structures around you. So you can go to our website at casagalactica.com, and you can find that there by subscribing to our mailing list. And you also get another free handbook to help strengthen your intuition and a few other things as well. But if we're talking about PTSD Awareness Month, I think that this is a really valuable thing that you can just access. You'll get it in your inbox, and you can just learn for free and take another step if you feel like any of this resonates with you. So appreciate it, and please feel free to check out all of our other stuff, and contact me if you have any questions for a free consultation.
Thank you so much for joining in the discussion. I also want to tell those who are watching, those who are listening, I always appreciate, obviously you listening. I appreciate new guests, returning guests. I have this idea that if people return, I guess I'm doing something okay. But at the same time, I also want to say, a lot of times when people ask me, well, it's Revive Ministry. Revive sounds so churchy, sounds so faith-based. I'm like, well, I don't see it that way. I feel like you go mission. You see missionaries. They go out and give food. They give resources. What I give is a space to continue the dialogue. I appreciate people just like Michael to share his story, inspirational story of hope. It's not to proselytize. Sometimes people are like, well, this is what I believe. It's not about that. It's about the people. Why we talk about tribute to PTSD? We make it so complicated. We talk about it because the people we love, people we care about, maybe not here, people are suffering. That is why. And at the end of the day, I just really appreciate every guest. Thank you, Michael, for coming on. I want to share with those listening to keep updated with Revive Ministry. Go to reviveministryfl.com. This is goodbye from Revive Ministry with this last quote from Neil Strauss. He says, "People go through so much pain trying to avoid pain."